Brian, thank you very much for agreeing to run us through kind of teaching council, entry routes, access routes and all that kind of stuff. I think the kind of, for us, kind of understanding the pathways and being able to advise students is fantastic. So I really do appreciate you taking time out today, especially at lunchtime, right? Okay. So I'll let you take over. It is being recorded, right, as well. But I suppose if anybody has any questions, if they don't mind, just drop them into the chat function and we can ask them near the end. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gavin. And just thanks to AHECS, all the team there, Caroline, I know she's on leave, and yourself and others for organising it. And as you said, you're all taking your lunchtime out as well, so I appreciate that. So I'll just start off. Brian Fahy is my name. I'm a primary school teacher in a school in Limerick, but I've been on secondment for the last number of years with the Teaching Council. So I'll just give you an introduction today to the, I suppose, teaching profession and reasons students in your colleges might consider teaching. I'll give you a brief overview of the system and how to become a registered teacher, and then I'll look at teacher supply. So where are the jobs, I suppose, in short. So the role of the council, first of all, we're based here in the Maynooth Business Campus in County Kildare. We're the professional standards body for teaching in Ireland. We have a remit to both promote and regulate the profession. So if it's from the time a student decides I want to be a teacher to when they retire, we have a role, I suppose, that's important in maintaining standards. So we'd advise the minister on what are the entry requirements, or what they should be, for programs of initial teacher education. When you graduate from one of those teacher education programs, you'd have to register with the council in order for your salary to be paid from public funds, and you'd have to maintain ongoing registration until you, I suppose, retire. So that's some of our work. We have a professional standards team who investigate complaints against registered teachers. We also have a teachers learning and research section. So there's quite a bit of work going on in the council, and at the moment there's about nearly 116,000 teachers on the register between primary, post-primary and further education, and we would administer the Garda vetting for all of those teachers on an ongoing basis. So that's just a flavour of the work that's done here in Maynooth. So reasons why your students might consider teaching. I've just some pictures to demonstrate. At the top there, you can choose what age group you choose to teach. So primary school 4 to 12, post-primary 12 to 18, further education or in the adult education sector as well. If you look at the bottom, you can decide what you teach. So as a post-primary teacher, whether it's art, music, PE, wherever your passion is, you can bring that to your teaching career and pass that passion for your subject on to future, I suppose, possible teachers, or onto your students, of course. So that's at post-primary. Of course, you have a subject area. At primary, you teach all of the subjects. And then just at the top right there, you can see teachers are needed all over the world. So it's I suppose, a qualification that allows you to be mobile, and teachers are needed everywhere. So you can decide where you teach, what you teach, who you teach, and there's a very set, structured working life for teachers as well. Primary school teachers, I think it's 182 days per year and 166 or 7 at post-primary level. So it's very set and structured in terms of when you teach, and obviously it lends itself to your, if you have, I suppose, a personal life, you can very much bring that into your teaching in your passion for your subject, but also, you know, you have all your weekends to yourself, you have your set structured holidays, so it's very I suppose conducive to your personal life as well. There's no unsocial hours as such. So just an overview of the education system. As I mentioned, the 3 sectors that we regulate, and the figures there to show that there's nearly 4,000 schools at primary and post-primary level recognised by the Department of Education, with nearly 1 million primary and post-primary students. So just some points to note regarding employment. There's a link between your Teaching Council registration and salary paid. So why must you register with the Teaching Council before you teach? And there's a piece of legislation called Section 30 of the Teaching Council Act. It just says that you need to be registered with the Teaching Council in order for your salary to be paid from the public funds. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. If a teacher or a school cannot find a registered teacher, they can employ an unregistered teacher, albeit, you know, against advice, but if they must, they can. So there is certain exceptions to that rule. So a teacher could be employed, for example, no more than 5 days in a row. It's a 5-day rule, it might be referred to as informally. And that teacher might work 5 days and they cannot work the 6th day, and then they can recommence 5 days. But there's a lot of stipulations that the school must meet in order to apply that rule. But in general, you must be registered with the Teaching Council in order for your salary to be paid from the public funds. And you can see that there's that's the salary scale on the right. So it's quite a competitive starting salary compared to some jobs, and it progresses to 71,503 after 27 years. So the circular letter regarding payment of salaries and what the rate of pay would be for substitution is available in that circular letter. So that's a question, for example, I was asked yesterday in NUI Galway, so I thought it would be helpful to put it in the presentation here today. The subjects that are in demand, so where would employment be most plentiful? Of course, cities and areas like that, but sciences, modern foreign languages, Gaeilge, maths and home economics are the areas where, or the subject areas where there is most demand. So if a student was considering post-primary teaching, I would try and direct them into those areas. However, if that's not where their passion lies, then I wouldn't be forcing them into an area just for employment reasons. You do need to have a love for what you're about to get into. So this is a new graphic that we're developing at the moment. It's not ready just yet, but it helps describe how to become a primary school teacher. So we're meeting, the Teaching Council and the Department of Education are meeting with AHECS, IGC, the AGA, and people also in the Department of Education Guidance Unit are coming along as well to focus on how to, I suppose, promote teaching as a profession, how organisations we can work together to support one another a bit more. So on foot of our previous meeting, this was a graphic we embarked on, I suppose, updating. So we have a previous graphic, but this is a more updated version, which I suppose has evolved on foot of our meetings with guidance organisations. And I know, as I mentioned, we will be meeting guidance organisations again next week, of which I know Catherine Staunton from DKIT and Dawn from IADT will be representing AHECS. So this is just a graphic that helps students understand how to become a primary school teacher, and it notes the locations where you can go. Then we have one for post-primary, and we also have, I'll just zoom in a little bit on the graphic on the bottom left. So you can see that how to become a primary teacher and a post-primary teacher, they're quite similar, except there's a slight difference when you go to option 2. And this is probably where most of your students will look at, or if they want to become a post-primary teacher, they will undertake a level 8 undergraduate degree, which is an honours level 8 degree. And they will complete then after that a PME, a 2-year professional Master of Education degree. If it's for primary, they can have their level 8 in any curricular or any subject area. They could do their level 8 degree in business, nursing, science, engineering. It doesn't have to relate to a curricular subject. That's for primary school teaching. But for post-primary, it does have to relate to a curricular subject area. So they need to cover enough of the subject that they wish to become a teacher of. And now, if they haven't, they would have to do top-up modules somewhere else or another course somewhere else to ensure they meet what's called the curricular subject requirements, which I'll speak about in a minute. So just option 2 is probably the most common route to teaching or pathway to teaching for those who are already in first year, second year, third year or fourth year in a higher education college. So they're just helpful graphics, and when these are finalized, we can circulate them to the entire group here. So just for primary, so we'll focus on the PME, the Professional Master of Education Primary. We have a link here to the PME minimum entry requirements and procedures for 2022. So these are out of date. Now they generally don't change much, but the 2023 ones haven't been produced yet. But this is a good guide as to what the PME primary requirements are. And they're set down by the Department of Education and Skills. But each institution that delivers the PME primary has autonomy in increasing those entry requirements if they wish. So it's very important that you check the website of each institution for the full entry requirements for 2023. And the 5 institutions that provide the Professional Master of Education Primary are Marino Institute of Education, Dublin City University, Hibernia College, Maynooth University and Mary Immaculate College. So you'll see, I'll just go back to the graphic. You can see those 5 institutions are on the map here. And for post-primary, it's a little bit different. There's a few more. So we'll just go back again. So this is a link that's worth looking at. If any student is interested in becoming a primary school teacher through the PME route, then this document is very important, but also check the website of the college. Now, in this document, you won't see reference to Hibernia College, but they are a private institution. They are an accredited provider, and they generally have 2 intakes per year. So they would take a spring intake in maybe February and another one then in September, as far as I know. But once you speak with the college, they would be able to, the student would be able to find out when the intake is. For post-primary, the entry requirements are set down again by not the Department of Education in this case, but the entry requirements will be noted on the institution's website. So if a student wants to become a post-primary teacher of a particular subject, so biology, they must have covered enough of biology on their level 8 undergraduate degree to ensure that they're in a position to apply for the PME post-primary. Now, not every institution will provide the PME post-primary in biology. They might provide it in a different subject. So the students would have to check on the websites of all the institutions to see, are they providing the PME post-primary in the subject area that they wish to become a teacher of. But they would need to check this document here. So for example, in general, it would be that you'd have a level 8 honours, an honours level 8 degree, and on that degree that you would have covered 60 credits of the subject area. And biology, then there's essential areas such as, you know, botany, zoology, microbiology and things like that, to make sure that the teacher has the relevant curricular knowledge to deliver this subject to Leaving Cert students when they're a teacher. So this just relates to post-primary. So I won't go into it in too much depth, but we can take questions maybe later if we wish. This is another website which is very helpful. It's from the Department of Education, gov.ie/teach and transforms. It talks about the undergraduate and the postgraduate pathways to teaching, and it also gives links to financial supports and access courses. So if any of your students have, for example, a disability, or they're from a group that's underrepresented in teaching, for example, if they're from the Traveller or Roma community or an area that's socio-economically disadvantaged, they may be eligible for an access course. So if they get onto this access course, they will have direct entry to a program of initial teacher education. Now that they would need to check, is there an access course available for primary school teaching in, we'll say, Mary Immaculate College or in Maynooth University, or post-primary teaching, whatever course they want to do, then they would have to check, is there an access course available for that? And there may be. So it's worth checking that out for students who have a disability, or who have, if they're from a group that's underrepresented in teaching. Of course, there's the DARE route as well, and that, you know, that would be advice on that, and supporting that would be, it'd be best to go to each individual institution for further information there. And then finally, then, if anybody doesn't want to qualify as a teacher in Ireland, they can qualify outside of Ireland. But you must flag with them, you can't just do a teacher education qualification. You must become a fully qualified teacher, which has to be certified by the competent authority in that country. So I'll just give you an example. At the moment, if your students decide to go to Northern Ireland and they complete one of the accredited programs in Northern Ireland to become a teacher, accredited by the General Teaching Council of Northern Ireland, they will get full registration afterwards. So that is deemed fully qualified in that jurisdiction. However, if a student qualifies in England, they're not fully qualified once they complete their degree, their PGCE, Postgraduate Certificate in Education. They must actually stay and do an induction period. That's post-qualification experience. And that induction period is now 2 years in England. So they need to work for 2 years in England and be able to provide evidence that they have completed that. So only when they're deemed fully qualified by the competent authority in that other country, it's only then that they can return to Ireland. And then under the European Directive on the recognition of professional qualifications, we can look at their qualifications and assess them, but we can't look at them unless they're deemed fully qualified. So that's just one first, and it would be up to the student to identify what fully qualified means in Australia or Queensland, you know, or whichever jurisdiction they're in. So once they get to our qualification assessment process, there's three parts to it. They make their application, and then when it's a fully complete application, the assessment will take place. It will take place and be finished within 3 months, and then the registration happens after that. So as I've kind of gone through it there, a person deemed to be fully qualified has completed a recognised teacher education qualification and a programme of induction generally in the country in which they have qualified, and you can provide an official letter from the competent authority stating that. There's a link there of how to apply for registration. So you do it through teachingcouncil.ie, you create an account for free, and then you submit your application for registration, and there's a fee then attached to that. It depends on whether it's primary or post-primary, the fee will vary, and it depends on how many curricular subject areas you have at post-primary, because each of them would need to be assessed, so the fees vary on that. Just to note that we would check to see has the student met the same minimum standards as graduates in Ireland have met. So for example, if someone qualified as a primary school teacher outside of Ireland, they may not have been taught how to teach Gaeilge to those students aged 4 to 12. So we would apply Irish language requirement on their registration. Now, they can still work in a primary school, they can still get the full rate of pay, they can still obtain a full contract in a school. There's no disadvantage other than maybe at interview level, a principal or a school may deem full registration to be more advantageous. So that would be, you know, at interview level at primary, you could be asked a question in Irish, and your competence in Irish could be tested at interview level that way. But that would be a condition on your registration, and you'd have 3 years to address that. If you don't address it within 3 years, you could apply for an extension if you have a reason for not addressing it, but it would need to be addressed before you get full registration. And Marino Institute of Education would support that condition. At post-primary, the history and the structures of the Irish education system is something that might be lacking, so that might be applied to your registration as well. Also at post-primary, you need to be a teacher of a particular subject, so we would check to see have you met the curricular subject requirements that I spoke about for that subject. So we, as I mentioned biology earlier, we would check did you cover 60 credits of biology, and did you cover the essential areas, and so on. So a full list of the conditions is available to look at on our website through that link there. But they're the two most common qualification shortfalls that might be added to your registration. We'd also check, for example, have you completed foundation studies, psychology of education, philosophy of education, those sorts of things as well. And then just on teacher supply, it's an international and national challenge. So the demand is nationwide for teachers, but as I mentioned earlier, the demand is in those subject areas for post-primary, the sciences, maths, modern foreign languages, Gaeilge and home economics, and also in particular the Greater Dublin area and any cities. You can probably take a good guess yourself. You know, housing is the cost of rent. People will move out of those areas, so then there's a lack of teachers and so on in those areas. So you'd probably be able to take a good guess as to what areas need teachers more, aside from knowing anything about the education system, just on a general societal level. But those are the subject areas which are in demand mostly. And educationpost.ie is where students would go afterwards to look for contracts of employment, and if they wish, they could enroll on the sub-seeker section of Education Post, and that's for substitution. So I'll just take a look here at, I just went on to Education Post this morning. I can see there's 125 post-primary jobs available. We're in September, so most jobs would be available towards the end of the term, so April, May, June, July, August rather than in September. But you can see the types of jobs that are being advertised. Gaeilge, maths, we've religion and history there, and we've maths again, business and geography. So you can see maths and Gaeilge are coming up, and they're the subjects that are in demand. This is also the Subseeker platform, what it looks like. A student can indicate their preference for work, if they're available or they're not available for the next 2 weeks. So it'll support them in identifying and getting linking up, you know, rather than going around to the schools with your CVs and emailing every school. You can put your CV and upload your profile on Subseeker, and it connects the student teacher or the teacher with the school for employment reasons. So that's just an overview, I suppose, of the employment. And I know you might have questions on different aspects of what I've said there in terms of curricular subject requirements, entry requirements, and even on employment. So I might take some questions now, Gavin, if that's helpful, because I know people have their own particular questions they might have. And info@teachingcouncil.ie is an email address you can contact if you have any questions after the session as well. So I'll just stop my screen share, and thanks for taking that time there to listen to my presentation.
Thanks, Brian. Some really good information there. Can I ask, are we going to get a copy of the slides? That was one of the first questions that came in. That'd be
yes,
great. We can
I'll actually put it into the chat. Is that okay now?
That's brilliant.
Then you can have the links. I meant to send it before the meeting, so apologies. I don't think I can attach it to the chat, but I might just send it to you afterwards if that's okay.
If you send it to me, I can just send it to. I can send it on to Caroline as well, but I'll send it out to the guys who have attended, so they actually have it immediately. Question there from Deirdre in UCC. I suppose it comes down to the specific subject requirements, right? So she has an example of a graduate of tourism, may see confirmation that the content degree will be sufficient to teach business at Leaving Cert level. Course modules may all have tourism in the title. Can someone like this have their degree assessed in advance by the Teaching Council? Individual degree assessments were offered by TC at a fee in the past. So how should we advise?
Yeah, so no, unfortunately, we don't do assessments of any courses like that to check, do you meet the requirements? So what we would do, essentially, we wouldn't have the ability, because there's hundreds of people thinking about teaching all over the world. They could have courses from Australia, America, everywhere coming to us. We just wouldn't have the capacity to assess the courses. So what we have is the curricular requirements, and we ask the student do a self-declaration that they meet them. Now, I know it says Tourism 1 or Tourism 2. What we would look at then is that they would break open that module and look at the module descriptors and look to see within that, do they genuinely think that they have met the requirements? Sometimes there might be some ambiguity, but if it's self-declaration from them, and then the university or the PME provider would maybe check that they have 60 credits of that subject covered, and when they're on the PME, then we would invite them, if they wish, to submit all their documents, and we would conduct a PME verification process. That's where we would look through, with a fine-tooth comb to see have they met all the requirements, and if not, we would advise the student that you're a few credits short here in this area prior to the completion of your PME, or shortly afterwards, if you wish. You would need to go back to do a module on this or that. And that would need to be completed before their registration is finalised. But they have the remainder of their PME, maybe a year and a half, to fix that up. And sometimes they would take parallel modules along their PME. Does that help, Deirdre, there? Or
yeah, it's very helpful. Yeah, it is helpful to know what you can and can't do. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for that, Brian. Yeah.
Thanks,
we get a lot of queries like this sometimes. It's a bit of a grey area. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
there's your responsibility for it. Yeah.
What we would say is, if they're really unsure, whoever delivered the Tourism 1, Tourism 2 modules to them, that they might be able to link back in with the lecturers or link back in with the staff to say, you know, they're a graduate, so we'd expect that they might be able to make that determination themselves, but they might be able to link back in with whoever provided those modules to them to say, do you think, in your professional opinion, that this meets the requirements for this? Because they are the experts, they are the ones that delivered it. It's not the Teaching Council. We have an external advisor who might be very well people delivering those similar modules in a college somewhere. So if they get, I suppose, clarity from the people who provided that module or those modules, that would be the best. They're the best people to determine.
But you'll decide then ultimately as well, you know. But at least if there is the PME and there's some deficits, it seems like they can give an opportunity in the PME to become aware of them and try and do something.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So they have to wait until they're in the PME to get that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Deirdre. Brian, another question there from Carol. Sure, the regular courses that are examined that meet or do not meet the criteria, would there not be someone in the teaching council who would know these courses? So it's probably the ones that don't have maybe additional modules, like they're just very standard. As in,
So I understand what you asked there, Carol. You know, surely there's a set of courses that generally meet all the time. There probably are. I wouldn't know what they are, but I'm sure they are available. However, in general, there's always electives on courses. Sometimes there's a programmatic review and the course could slightly change. So if in the event that we provided a list of any sort, we would have to vet that list every year to ensure, and we would have to say students must take this elective. Now, not every course is set up so that the output is teaching. So the courses could change for another reason. And then it's not in line. For example, you could have a maths student then that has not covered geometry, and then we are obliged then to still take them if we had published a list. So unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to publish a list, even though I know what you mean. It would be very helpful. We did have a list in the past, but because of courses evolving and changing, because of so many different career paths and students taking different electives, we wouldn't be able to produce a list. And so. Sorry about that, Carol.
It's just very hard for students to keep where, like, somebody had submitted it the year before and the year before that, and knowing that the stuff hasn't really changed very much, it's just very difficult for the poor students to have to do that again. Do you know what I mean? When they know maybe somebody in the past who did the course and it looks fairly similar to what it is this time. It's like just going around the houses again and again just for the sake of it. That's my only but I do get your point as well, but not all courses have electives in them. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
There are some courses which are fairly standard and there's no choices and just do the same thing all the way through, It'll be just nice to be able to tic-tac with somebody who might have, so that if you get onto the teaching council, there might be somebody who had some experience of this course before, and they'd be able to say, well, actually last year we had someone and that went through okay, but you might need to check to make sure what the differences are. Do you know what I mean? If any. And that would save the student having to go through the whole thing again,
Yeah, no, absolutely appreciate that. And
the human factor.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, appreciate that. Look, I'll note that, and I'll let the team know. What my hunch is that it would be, if we provide that service to some, we have to provide it to all. But yeah.
But suppose, for example, just suppose I was married or one of my best friends worked in the teaching council and happened to come across that course.
Yeah.
Well, then he or she would be able to say, oh, actually, we looked at that one, and you know something, last year it was fine. So if it hasn't changed at all, well, it should be okay going through, which would help the student. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it shouldn't be down to people who might know individuals maybe on a personal level who work there. That's just
look at last year's and say,
had a query, you could put a question out to all the staff and say, does anyone know about this course? And if they don't know about it, that's fair enough. But you can be sure some of the courses that go through there regularly, people might know about it. Just shortcutting all that hard work.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. Thanks, Carol. I note that down.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Carol. Marie, what qualifications are needed to teach CSPE or SPHE?
So it's now politics and society would be the closest probably thing to CSPE. So CSPE is not a registerable subject after 2020 or from the 1st of January 2023. So our updated curricular subject requirements refer to politics and society, and there's no mention of CSPE in our requirements. So the qualifications would be that you'd have a PME completed in post-primary teaching, 12 to 18 years old, and in order to get onto that, you'd have to meet the requirements for politics and society, which offhand you have your honours level 8 degree, and you have 60 credits of politics and society covered up to at least, or with some modules taken at 3rd year level or higher. But there's no specific essential areas in politics and society. But when you look at I think it's the last page nearly on our curricular subject requirements, there are details there.
Thanks, Brian. Because I had a couple of students in who are, interested in the PME. They have, say, one subject, say English, or they might have geography or whatever, and they've taken Soc and Pol in 1st year, and they just were querying that there's sort of, that, if you do 1st year, if you do Soc and Pol in 1st year, because they drop it in the 2nd year, are you still eligible to apply or to use it as a registered subject?
So if they meet the requirements, they can absolutely register.
So they have to have 60 credits in the 1 year, probably won't have 60 credits in 1 year.
So they would need to have 60 credits overall in their degree. Overall in the degree. So the degree might be 240 credits. So they need 60, and they would need to take some of the credits, I believe, at 3rd year or higher.
Which you see here a lot. Soc and Pol, they wouldn't. They might not continue it. So it's only if they continue it as a main subject that they'd get those credits.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've just brought up the requirement. I just linked in the requirements there, and it's on page 30, and it says applicants must hold a degree level qualification with politics.
And some of those must be at 3rd year level.
No, I'm just looking to see, as that mentioned there, it's generally mentioned in them, but I don't see it in that particular one. So there's no mention of 3rd year level there. Asks for politics, political science, or sociology, or a combination of at least 3 of the following areas. So I suppose it's best to just have a quick look at.
And have a look at it. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But there's actually no mention, sorry, of 3rd year level there.
Of the 3rd level. So but they definitely need the 60 overall.
60 overall, yeah.
Right,
and
that's
level
great.
8, yeah.
At level 8, yeah. Great. Thanks a million, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Marie. Can final year art students apply for substitute teaching prior to undertaking PME post-primary?
Okay, so generally substitute teachers would have teaching council registration, save for the exception where a school decides to employ an unregistered teacher, but I'll speak about that in a minute. So to get teaching council registration, you can apply for registration under Route 3 further education, and that's where a student with a level 8 degree already, so you need to have their level 8 degree, so that means they'd probably have to have qualified, so final year arts might not work. So you need to have qualified from your degree or graduated, so you'd have your level 8 degree, and then you apply for further education registration, provided your degree is at least 3 years in length, 180 credits. So that might yield them further education registration, and then that will give them a teaching council number. And as a result, then they can use that certificate of registration to seek substitution work at primary or post-primary level. Now, they would get the unqualified rate of pay because they're teaching what we call out of sector, because they're a registered further education teacher, which relates to the adult sector, adult education. But that's how they may undertake substitution work. But they would need to have a level 8 degree of 180 credits or more to get that registration. And then back to the point where the school can employ unregistered teachers. That's only in exceptional circumstances where they cannot find a registered teacher. So they can technically approach a school. Anyone here can approach a school and look to be employed. For example, the school would have to ensure they're satisfied with Garda vetting. I believe there's a requirement that you hold a level 7 degree and that, you know, they believe you're suitable. So the school determines employment, not the teaching council or the Department of Education. It's the school that has to ultimately decide whether to employ you or not. So technically, yes, they could in their final year of arts, but generally people would complete their level 8 first, seek further education registration with ourselves, and use that to support their substitution work afterwards.
Super, thanks, Brian. Etna, saying thank you. Sound session very helpful. And she wants to know, do you come on campus, do talks directly to students by any chance?
We do, yeah. So we go out and about. We go to about 35 events every year. We're in NUI Galway yesterday. We're going to yourself, Gavin, tomorrow in UL, and we'll be going to Dundalk IT in October. So yes, we do, Etna. And if you want to contact myself, you can email I'll pop in my email address here, and if we have availability, we can call out, of course. Yeah. And if there's any particular queries your students are having or coming with, if you can send them to me in advance, I can tailor a presentation around that area, because you might be delivering particular courses that focus on particular areas of, you know, curricular subjects at post-primary rather than, say, primary. So I can tailor a presentation for your particular students, if you wish. So yeah, is the answer to that.
Thanks so much.
Super. Okay. Just actually a final thought, actually, Brian. Education Post, it's a really good website, right? Okay. And I would, if we ever get any kind of queries from students, we always direct them to it, right? Inevitably, we will always have students come back and say, well, the amount of permanent posts is very limited, and it's all seems to be specific purpose contracts, very short-term contracts, or substitution or maternity leave. So I mean, I think students are kind of I mean, and actually sometimes I can't give them a response to this, right? And I know the team can't either, but it would seem that the amount of permanent roles out there is quite limited. It seems to be all kind of short term or kind of very specific purpose contracts, and that seems to be making students consider, will we go down that road? Definitely of the PME, when they're kind of looking and saying, well, if I do this 2 years, what's the chance of me getting a full-time role, right? Okay, so I don't know if you have a thought on that, or.
Yeah, no, it's very legitimate, and it is the case for particularly those who choose post-primary subjects that are not in demand. Primary contracts are generally more full, I suppose. 25 hours a week is primary, full-time, 22 at post-primary. You generally don't see too many partial contracts at primary level, but at post-primary you do. And the teacher unions have raised this, in that, you know, why would people decide to become teachers if they can't see full-time employment? Because the salary scale that I've put up, that's based on full-time work. If you only have half-time work, 11 hours a week, you're only getting half salary. So look, it's a very legitimate concern. I suppose it would relate to your subject areas and where you decide to look for work. And the nature of post-primary is that you teach probably a number of subjects. You would be most lucky to get a teaching post in 1 or 2 of your subjects that amounts to 22 hours. So if you had 11 hours history and 11 hours English, you'd be very lucky. Yeah. Generally, people would take whatever 6 hours they have in their main subject, and they might get 2 or 3 hours in another subject if they had it. They might get some substitution work, and over time, then they gradually build their 22-hour contract with a number of different roles in the school. So yes, it's not straight into a permanent post, and you do have to, I suppose, maybe labour for a while. The substitution work, myself, when I was starting to be a primary teacher, you have to do your subbing for a number of months, and you get a partial, you know, maybe 3 days a week, and eventually you're up to your 5 days a week. Look, and I suppose I've no response to it. I suppose
I just kind of wonder what your thoughts were.
Just outlining the nature of post-primary. All I'd say is try and urge your students to look at subjects. I know in UL there, you've the sciences, so there'll be big demand definite subjects to look at. History, geography, English, they're not as, people do love them, but employment is a challenge later. I suppose that's just a decision for the student to make. If they wish to.
I suppose the other 2 things, right? Okay, I was just kind of thinking, and I agree with you, because you have to decide where you're going, and does it make sense? But I suppose we've kind of heard language being used around the primary side of the house as well, is that, you know, that kind of baby bubble and stuff like that is dissipating, and demand for primary roles are really going to drop, right? Okay, because there won't be enough of students attending, right? Okay, and even talk of primary school teachers maybe having to upskill into secondary, into post primary. So that's something that's being planned for, or that's a reality?
I'm not aware of any upskilling requirement. It certainly wouldn't be a demand, I would imagine, but I'm not aware of any of that. That would probably be in the remit of the Department of Education. But there is a technical report, a statistical model of the teacher supply and the demand for teachers up till 2038, published by the Department of Education, and it does show an oversupply of primary and post-primary teachers. But this is, I suppose, a statistical model. So an oversupply would mean that we've obviously too many teachers and there's not enough jobs for them. However, so that speaks to what you said there. But this is, I suppose, they've acknowledged it's an imperfect model. It doesn't account for, we'll say, the pandemic, which caused a severe requirement and shortage of teachers. There's the population, there might be a general supply of teachers and a general demand, but they may not meet in the specific geographical areas.
Yeah.
So there might be an oversupply in one area, but an undersupply in another. So there's many factors, I suppose, to look at. But yeah, the population trends would show what you've said, as the technical report has spoken to. But there's always, I suppose, a demand in particular areas for teachers, and it would depend, I suppose, on a student teacher or a teacher's willingness to move outside of their hometown to a city area to look for the job, or no, I'm only containing myself to this area and I want a job in this area only. I suppose I can't predict.
No, I mean, I wasn't Brian. I suppose even just in response to that, I suppose if they are being asked to move to a city and it's on substitute hours, the difficulty of even paying for accommodation, there's all those. I mean, but that's a bigger conversation, right?
Of course, sure. We won't solve it today, and that's the very reason that's why the vacancies are there, is because the teachers in the first place have left because they can't afford the accommodation. And that's the same with nurses, guards, so on, public service, because you do get the same salary whether you're in one side of the country or the other. And I suppose that's a larger conversation beyond, beyond us today. But yeah, we're all aware of that.
Yeah. And then just my final thing before we all go, right, okay, was do you ever do kind of analysis of those who have graduated versus those who register with the teaching council? Like, is there, like, it's almost like kind of links to the one that we just spoke before. Is there a thing that certain students don't ever actually go into teaching? They may actually go abroad to teach or something like that, and maybe never register with the teaching council. Do we look at that?
We would have certain data. We wouldn't have a perfect picture of that at all. For example, UL could produce 500 graduates, but only 400 might register with us, and we don't know, and nobody knows about the other 100.
Okay.
Unless there's an exit survey done from UL to say, are you going to register? And then we can tally that with yourselves. So there's none of that, I suppose, going on. But we can see that from, I suppose, figures that there has been X amount of graduates of initial teacher education programs and how many came onto our register. But we don't know, did some come on from abroad, and then are they the same people? 2,000 graduates from Ireland, 2,000 onto the register, but in fact 500 came from Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So no, we don't have a perfect picture of that, but we do have anecdotal evidence that people do leave teaching for industry, and so that's definitely happening because salaries, I suppose, are higher in certain industry areas, but we don't have any specific data on that. That we couldn't tell a perfect picture.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. I just think final question here from Ashling. Sorry. All subject requirements other than politics and society stay with the X subject studied up to and including third level or higher or modular equivalent. Could this be an omission?
I'll check. I don't know. I'll check that, Ashling, because I actually said that as well. I'm so used to reading them, and I always come across that part, and I omitted it then. I omitted checking the politics and society page, and then I checked it and I realized it wasn't there. So I'll check that for you and I'll come back.
Super. Yeah. Great. Finally, Brian, thank you once again. Really appreciate you